So, you know that incredible brain of yours, the thing that makes you, well, you? Turns out there's this ancient, really powerful process that can literally take control of it, turning your greatest asset against you. We're going to dive into how that works. Okay, just picture this for a second. Let's say you're the CEO of some massive company, right? But your own head of security, he can lock you out of the boardroom anytime he hears a loud noise. It sounds absurd, but here's the thing. Inside your brain, this isn't some crazy metaphor. For a lot of us, it's a daily reality. And this phenomenon, it has a name. It's called an amygdala hijack. That security guard we were just talking about? That's your amygdala. It's this super old, lightning-fast part of your brain, and its only job is to keep you alive. The problem is, sometimes it gets a little, well, a little overzealous. All right, so let's get into it. What does it actually feel like when this internal security guard slams the door shut and locks you out of your own mind? Because this hijack, it's not just a cute phrase. It's a full-body experience with some very real, very physical symptoms. Oh yeah, you know the feeling. All of a sudden, your heart is just pounding out of your chest. Your palms get all sweaty, and your ability to think clearly, to be logical, gone. It just vanishes. Your higher-level executive functions are totally sacrificed for this raw, primal survival mode. And in that moment, you are absolutely not in charge anymore. You've gone from CEO to just pure knee-jerk reaction. Now, here's something really interesting. This kind of thing, it tends to happen way more often to let's call it, a specific type of person. If you're someone who processes a ton of information, if you see patterns that other people just don't, if you have what we might call an unordinary mind, then your internal security guard is probably hypersensitive. It's on high alert all the time. It sees threats in the shadows of everything: an unanswered text, a tiny shift in someone's tone of voice, a deadline that's still weeks away. To your ancient brain, a little bit of social awkwardness feels exactly the same as a tiger lurking in the tall grass. So, if this is such a normal biological thing, why do we feel so broken when it happens? Why are we so hard on ourselves about it? Well, it turns out most of us are walking around with a completely wrong idea about how our brains even work. We're using a flawed model. I'm talking about the computer metaphor. You've heard this a million times, right? Your brain is a processor. Your memory is a hard drive. Your habits are just lines of code you can reprogram. And the worst one? Your emotions? Oh, those are just bugs in the system that you need to find and delete. It all sounds so neat and tidy and scientific, but honestly, it's a really dangerous trap. And this right here, this lays out the problem perfectly. The myth is that our brain is hardware, a clean, logical processor you can just upgrade. But the reality? The reality is that our brain is wetware. Think about that for a second. It's a living thing, an ecosystem. It's messy, it's chaotic, it's always changing. It's, moist and biological. It is so not a machine. Okay, so what? Why does this distinction even matter? What's the actual real-world cost of buying into this myth? What happens when we try to treat our messy biological wetware like a piece of perfect, predictable hardware? Well, the cost is huge. It leads to this, a really powerful idea from the source material. It's creating a generation of people who feel obsolete or broken. Why? Simply because they cannot maintain the soulless stability of silicon. Think about that. We expect ourselves to be like a computer chip, and then we beat ourselves up when we can't be. And this belief, it traps us in a really nasty self-destructive loop. Sound familiar? You feel guilty when your system needs to rest. You get frustrated, even angry, when you can't just download a new skill overnight. You fall into despair because you can't just hit delete on a painful memory. And of course, you see that amygdala hijack as a total system crash, a fatal error, instead of seeing it for what it truly is, a biological signal. So here's the big takeaway from all this. You're not weak, you're not too emotional. You are literally a prisoner to an outdated security protocol. I mean, think about it. Your brain's security system hasn't had a software update in 50,000 years. And until you really truly get that, you're just going to stay trapped by your own ancient survival instincts. Which brings us to the most important shift in thinking in this entire explainer. It's time to finally throw out that old, broken myth and really start to embrace the reality of our own biology. I really want you to let this sink in, just for a second. You are not a machine. You are an ecosystem.
a living, breathing, complex, and beautiful ecosystem. And recognizing that changes absolutely everything.
So this is the whole idea behind wetware. It's this beautiful concept that accepts our minds for what they are, living, chaotic, and constantly changing. And here's the key. You can't program an ecosystem. You can't just find a bug and fix the code. The only thing you can do is cultivate it. You have to work with it, not fight against it.
Okay, so this is all great in theory, but how do we actually use this new wetware mindset to deal with the amygdala hijack? How do we start to recalibrate that super sensitive internal alarm? Well, right off the bat, you need to know the goal isn't to get rid of it. You can't. The goal is management. It really boils down to a new 3-step approach. First, just learn to detect when the hijack is happening. Notice the heart racing, notice the sweaty palms, and this is the hard part, don't judge yourself for it. Step 2, in that moment, actively remember this is wetware, not hardware. It's not a system crash, it's biology doing its thing. And finally, step 3, shift your focus. Stop trying to delete the feeling and instead start working to cultivate your response to it over time. Because when you accept this biological reality, you finally get to stop fighting a battle that you were never, ever going to win. You can stop wasting that incredible, elite cognitive bandwidth of yours on these imaginary internal battles, and that frees up all that amazing mental energy for the things that actually matter. So, when you boil it all down, it really comes to this: a fundamental choice about how you decide to see yourself. And I think this quote just captures the entire idea perfectly. You are not a machine waiting for an upgrade, you are an ecosystem waiting to be cultivated. You're not some broken piece of tech waiting for the next update to fix you. You are this incredibly rich, complex ecosystem just waiting for the right conditions to really thrive. So really, the choice is yours. Are you going to keep wasting your time trying to debug a machine that doesn't even exist? Or are you ready to start the much more interesting, much more rewarding work of actually cultivating the unique, incredible ecosystem that is your own mind? Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are going to take a really popular idea, the idea that your brain is basically a computer, and we're going to tear it apart. We'll show you the one biological glitch that proves you're not a machine. So let's just ask it straight up. Is your brain a computer? I mean, we all kind of act like it is, right? We talk about processing information, storing memories, trying to reboot when we're tired. But is that comparison actually helping us? Or is it maybe holding us back? Just think about the language we use all the time. You try to reprogram a bad habit, or download a new skill, or you wish you could just delete a painful memory. It makes it sound like we're just bits and bytes, but it also sets up this totally flawed expectation that we should work with the flawless efficiency of a machine. And that, right there, is the trap, the machine mindset. When you think you're a machine, you expect perfection. You feel guilty just for needing a break. You get angry at yourself for not learning something instantly. And you feel totally broken when you can't just erase a bad memory. It's this vicious cycle that makes you feel obsolete, just for being human. So here's where the two models just completely collide. On one hand, we have the machine, a processor, stable hardware running on code. But the reality? Well, our brain is more like an ecosystem. It's wetware, living, chaotic, and biological. And that one difference, well, that changes everything. So what's the one biological fact that just shatters the whole computer metaphor? It all comes down to this tiny but absolutely crucial delay in our own neural wiring. It's called the neural latency gap. Okay, let's imagine your brain has a couple of key players. First, you've got a super fast, instinct-driven security guard. That's your amygdala. And then you have the thoughtful, logical CEO. That's your prefrontal cortex. Now here's the kicker. There's a communication delay between them. So here's how it plays out. Information comes into your brain. And who gets it first? The security guard, the amygdala. And it makes an instant call, threat or no threat. It's only after that call is made, milliseconds later, that the memo even reaches your CEO, the prefrontal cortex. Think about that. Your security team makes a decision before your leader even knows there's a problem. Now, let's look at what happens when this little delay blows up into a full-blown system failure. What happens when that security guard doesn't just raise an eyebrow but pulls the fire alarm for the entire building and starts screaming? Well, that's what's called an amygdala hijack. It's that sudden, overwhelming emotional wave that feels like it comes out of nowhere. During a hijack, your emotional security guard literally takes over the whole operation, completely shutting down your logical CEO. And this isn't just a feeling, it's a real physical event. The amygdala floods your entire system with stress hormones. We're talking cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals don't just make you feel stressed, they physically sever the connection to your prefrontal cortex. Your logic center is literally taken offline. If we put it in engineering terms, your brain is experiencing a systemic shutdown. Your CEO is offline, and your entire system is running on safety code only. Now, that was fantastic for our ancestors who might run into a tiger, but in our modern world, it's a catastrophe. You can't negotiate a deal, you can't write code, you can't think strategically when your brain is 100% convinced you're about to die. Now, for some people, especially those with what you might call a high bandwidth or atypical mind, this isn't just a random glitch. No, it can become a chronic, absolutely exhausting state of being. This is what creates something called a sensitivity loop. Because if your system is naturally high bandwidth, if you just detect more noise from the world around you, you're going to trigger way more of these alarms. And that leads to chronic fatigue and a really, really low return on your mental energy. I love this analogy. It's like you're living in a house where the smoke detector is so sensitive, it shrieks every single time you boil water for tea. You just become exhausted by the constant false positives coming from your own biology, and that leaves you with no energy to respond to the real opportunities, the real fires that actually matter. And the cost of this is, well, it's huge. Just look at where your cognitive energy goes. A massive chunk is wasted on false alarms and the fatigue that comes with them. That leaves you with just a tiny slice for the things you actually want to do. This constant state of emergency completely drains the system, turning a potentially brilliant mind into a reactive machine that's just too tired to create and too scared to lead.
So, how in the world do we break out of this cycle? We have to throw out that old, broken metaphor and fully embrace a new way of seeing ourselves. The real truth is, your brain is not clean, predictable hardware. It's messy. It's biological. It's wetware. It's a living, breathing, sometimes chaotic system. And just accepting that reality, that's the first huge step toward working with your biology instead of constantly fighting against it. And this brings us to a much more powerful and, frankly, kinder perspective. You are not a machine waiting for an upgrade. You are an ecosystem waiting to be cultivated. What does that mean? It means your goal isn't fixing bugs. It's about understanding your own internal weather, nurturing the soil, and working with the seasons of your own mind. It's a system that doesn't need to be fixed, but understood. So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if the things you've always seen as your greatest flaws, your sensitivity, your big emotions, your quick reactions, what if they aren't bugs at all? What if they're actually core features of a completely different and incredibly powerful operating system? All right, let's talk about something really important: building an architecture for calm. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of our internal alarm system. The goal here is to figure out how to stop being a victim of our own reactions and instead become the administrator of our own regulation. So yeah, let's dive right in. You know that feeling, right? That moment of panic or anxiety where your internal alarm just starts blaring and it feels like you can't shut it off? That's a real thing. It's called an amygdala hijack. And in that moment, it seriously feels like your rational brain has just packed its bags and left the building. And here is the absolute key, the thing that trips so many of us up. You can't talk your way out of it. When that alarm fires, the communication line to your brain's logic center, it's literally disconnected. You can't reason with a fire alarm that's already cut its own phone lines. It's just not possible. So if we can't talk our way out of it, why does so many of our attempts to fix this stuff just fail? Well, a lot of the time, it comes down to a really common but really flawed metaphor we use to understand our own minds. And honestly, it sets us up for failure before we even start. We've all kind of bought into this idea, right? That the brain is just hardware, that our habits and feelings are just code that can be rewritten or deleted. But as this quote points out, this comparison has become a really dangerous cognitive trap. It's making a whole lot of us feel obsolete or fundamentally broken. And this way of thinking causes real damage. We start expecting our brains to act like machines. So we feel guilty when we need to rest. We get angry with ourselves when we can't just download a new skill instantly.
We get frustrated that we can't just drag a painful memory to the trash bin. It creates this impossible loop of expecting 100% efficiency, which of course always leads to feeling broken. Okay, so let's just ditch that old model. On the left, you see the trap, the brain as hardware, a processor to be optimized. But on the right, that's the truth. Your brain isn't hardware, it's wetware. Think about that. It's a living, moist, kind of chaotic ecosystem that needs to be cultivated, not coded. And once you really get that distinction, it allows for this huge, profound shift in your perspective. You can stop trying to be a programmer for a machine that doesn't even exist, and you can step into a role that is so much more powerful. So first, let's reframe this whole thing. When that alarm goes off and that wave of anxiety hits, you are not the victim of the hijack. I know that feeling is incredibly real, but seeing yourself as a powerless victim, well, that's actually a choice. Instead of the victim, you are the system administrator. You have oversight. You can actually monitor the system, understand what its signals mean, and apply the right inputs to cool down the processor before it overheats. This right here, this is where your power really is. This definition of wetware really changes the whole game. It tells us we're not looking for some permanent, stable fix, because that's just not how living systems work. We are cultivating an ecosystem. We have to learn to work with its living, chaotic nature, not fight against it. And this is maybe the most liberating part of the whole thing. Anxiety stops being a character flaw. It's not a moral failing. It's just a data error. It's a false positive from a security filter that's just a little misconfigured. You're not broken. Your system just needs a little recalibration. Okay, so if you're the system admin, how do you actually, do anything? If you can't use logic, you have to use the system's own native language. You've got to find the emergency shutoff valve. So what is this native language? It's physical sensation. And the main communication channel for that language is something called the vagus nerve. I want you to think of this as the emergency shutoff valve. It's the physical input you can use to manually signal, hey, we're safe, directly to the system. So how does this actually work in the moment? Okay, step one, the alarm fires. But instead of fighting it with your thoughts, you introduce a physical input. This could be deep, slow breathing, or even just splashing cold water on your face. That physical action stimulates the vagus nerve, which then sends a powerful system-safe signal. This is a classic negative feedback loop. You're using a physical action to manually override that hormonal flood of fear and bring the system back into balance. But look, this isn't just about stopping a panic attack when it happens. The real long-term goal here is to move from being constantly hijacked by your alarm to becoming the actual architect of your own response system. The goal is not to get rid of fear entirely. I mean, it's a vital signal. The goal is to reduce the gain. Think of it like the sensitivity knob on a microphone. You are actively refactoring your own security protocol to be more precise, so it only fires when a real threat is actually present. And this is the payoff. Remember how the hijack cut the phone lines to your logic center? Well, when you use these tools to calm the system and restore that feedback loop, your brain's CEO, that high-level, strategic, rational part of you, finally regains access to the office. The connection is back online, and you can think clearly again. By shifting your own identity from the victim of the hijack to the system administrator, the architect of your own incredible wetware, you gain this amazing ability to navigate even the most intense situations with a sense of calm, calculated precision. So the only question left is, what are you going to build? Have you ever felt, kind of broken? Like you couldn't just reprogram a bad habit or delete a painful memory? Well, it turns out the problem might not actually be you. It might be the very metaphor we all use for our minds. Today, we are going to dig in and challenge that big idea, the popular but maybe flawed metaphor of the brain as a computer. Yeah, this sounds super familiar, right? This kind of language is absolutely everywhere. It tells us to look at this amazing, messy, biological thing in our heads and see it as cold, predictable technology. But what if that whole assumption is just wrong? So let's start by really looking at how deep this machine in your mind idea goes. You see, it's so much more than just a figure of speech. It's a mental model that actively shapes how we see ourselves and, maybe more importantly, what we expect from our own minds. I mean, just look at how natural these comparisons feel. We talk all the time about processing information, or our memory's storage capacity, or trying to download a new skill. This language doesn't just describe our biology, it completely reframes it in these mechanical terms. And as we're about to see, that has some really serious consequences.
And this right here, this gets to the absolute core of the problem. When you start thinking of yourself as a machine, you subconsciously start demanding machine-like performance from yourself. 100% efficiency, 24/7 uptime, flawless output. But here's the thing, we aren't machines, so this expectation just sets us up for failure.
And that failure leads us straight into what you could call a dangerous cognitive trap. Because when our messy human reality slams into these cold, robotic expectations, the result isn't efficiency. No, the result is real emotional pain.
First, just think about the guilt. A computer doesn't need a nap, right? A server doesn't get burned out. So when our own biological system signals that it needs to rest, we don't see it as necessary maintenance. We see it as a failure, a bug in the system. We literally feel guilty for the simple act of being human.
Or what about the anger and frustration? We think learning should be like downloading a file, quick, clean, and perfect the first time. But real learning? It's slow. It's messy. It is full of mistakes. So when we can't master a guitar overnight, we get angry, and we blame our faulty processor, instead of just respecting the natural biological process of learning.
And this might be the most painful of all, the despair. This computer metaphor suggests we should be able to just find a traumatic memory, drag it to the trash can, and click empty. But our memory is not a hard drive. Our experiences are woven into us. And that inability to just delete what hurts, that can make us feel completely powerless and, well, broken. And when you put it all together, you're left with this: a generation of people who feel obsolete or broken simply because they cannot maintain the soulless stability of silicon. Wow. So this metaphor isn't just inaccurate, it's actively hurting us.
But what if there's a better way to think about ourselves? It's time to throw out this old, broken metaphor and embrace something new, something that's way more accurate and, frankly, a lot more empowering.
Okay, so this is the big question, isn't it? If we just toss out that whole computer analogy, what are we left with? What is the true nature of this thing inside our heads that makes us who we are? The answer is wetware. It's not cold, rigid hardware. It is a living, messy, and dynamic ecosystem. I mean, just think about those words for a second. Moist, chaotic, ever-changing. That sounds a whole lot more like life, doesn't it? It's a term that finally acknowledges our biological nature instead of constantly trying to fight against it. So what does this actually mean for us in our day-to-day lives? Well, it means a huge practical shift in our mindset. We've got to move away from trying to engineer a machine and start patiently tending a garden.
And the difference here is profound. It's night and day. The machine mindset demands upgrades and perfect efficiency, and it always leads to feeling broken. But the ecosystem mindset, it understands the need for cultivation. You don't reprogram a garden, right? You tend to it. You give it sun and water and good soil. This is the real essence of working with your wetware, not against it.
This is probably the biggest change you can make. Just stop. Stop judging your biology by the standards of technology. Give yourself permission to be a living system, with all the cycles, the chaos, and the needs that come along with it.
Let this one sink in. You are not a machine waiting for an upgrade. You are an ecosystem waiting to be cultivated. You are not a faulty piece of equipment. You are a complex, beautiful, living ecosystem. You don't need an upgrade. You need care and patience and cultivation. So I'll leave you with this one question.